Welcome to the Where Humanity Meets Technology podcast.
Your company is forever going to be at risk.
Cybersecurity does impact us all.
That is the way cybersecurity breaches occur.
What is that one aspect that keeps you up at night?
We are much more exposed than before.
This is our podcast.
Can provide great customer service in a secure way.
That is just like spot on.
Cybersecurity today is out of control.
I believe infinite innovation.
The unknown risk is what's so important there.
Understanding the context is a totally different thing altogether.
Excellent information.
Where we talk to business leaders about cybersecurity, data management, and advanced digital solutions to provide strategies to increase the profitability of your company.
Thanks for everything, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Where Humanity Meets Technology. I am your host, Maurice Hamilton, and we have today a special guest who needs no introduction. We are talking to Jay McBain. Jay, as you all know, have worked for big organizations such as IBM, Forrester, and now he's with Canalys. And we're going to have a conversation with Jay in regards to some of the trends we see today in the industry and talk a little bit about what's happening, why is everything shifting. So Jay, welcome to the podcast. We're really happy to have you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So we chatted a few minutes offline and we're talking about our past there a little bit. And but I like to just start off and just get right into the meat and potatoes. And I actually had a chance to work with the VAR resellers, and more specifically, I worked with TD SYNNEX back before they actually did that acquisition. And you actually wrote an article back in those times, and you talked about the changes that you saw that were actually happening. Can we actually have a conversation about that? What did you see that was different, and why did you see the market making a shift?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been around 30 years, so like you, we've seen a lot. But for the industry we're in, which is now a $5 trillion hardware, software, and services industry, which 2/3 of that is services, which is great. The fact of the matter is, for 43 years, since August 12th, 1981, it's run very much in a linear way. You know, distribution through a VAR and through resell, how vendors work and how distributors and how partners have kind of always worked, and the way the economics run is through the point of sale. I've built a widget. Customers need a widget. I need to get the widget to market, and I need to distribute the widget, and I need somebody to collect the money. And still 73% of that $5 trillion is partners. Partners collecting the money, partners delivering the service. Like, it's such a big part of our industry. And it's 75% of the world trade as well is also the same thing, indirect. So we've kind of been on this path, and I don't know, there hasn't been a ton of changes in 4 decades. You know, all those elements still exist. That linear model still exists until now. We've got 76% of CEOs in every company, in every industry around the world, thinking their current business model will be unrecognizable in 5 years. They're thinking about subscription and consumption models. They're thinking about usage and value-based models, product-led growth models, a new resurgence of direct-to-consumer. We're going through all these changes right now. Everybody from your toothbrush manufacturer up to your car, everybody over from your pharmaceutical, bank, insurance, and obviously in tech. Every tech company is moving hard into subscription consumption. And that's what's creating a different economics of partnering when the point of sale, which everything got funded at, is now only the first 30 days with the customer. And earning that first 30 days is really important. But getting the customer to the dance is important, the first 28 moments. Getting them on the dance floor, which is that first 30 days, incredibly important. Keeping them dancing all night long, every 30 days forever, also increasingly important. All 3 of those things are just as important as, you know, what used to be just getting the deal, the widget sold. And that's changed everything in partnering and everything that we're going to talk about today.
Excellent, excellent. So let's can we actually go back and define the partnering element? Let's talk about that. And okay, let's talk about the partnering. Can we actually expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we've always looked at partnering as connected to the point of sale. So, you know, at Microsoft, for example, you'd recognize that they have 470,000 resellers in their network. And there's Microsoft in every company, every flower shop through Fortune 500 company in the world has a little piece or a big piece of Microsoft somewhere in it. So it's a perfect reflection for that point of sale to say there's about 500,000 people that sell technology widgets and collect money from the customer for doing it. And they get paid a margin and other things back in for doing that. So that's kind of the old world. Well, the fact in the new world, a partner is something different. We know in those first 28 moments before they make a decision, there's a lot of the customer, there's a lot of consulting, there's design, there's architecture, there's a lot of education out there on how they get smart. So they're arriving at the car dealership pretty smart. They're arriving at the software, hardware they're buying much smarter than they ever have. Every one of those 28 moments is run by someone or some company that probably ought to be a partner if that's your customer, getting them to that point of sale. At the point of sale is changing a lot. In a subscription or consumption model, like you don't buy Netflix from the cable guy in the white van, you buy it on a digital subscription. In the average deal today, for example, in the cloud, whether it's infrastructure in the cloud or software as a service, is security, there's 7 layers to every deal. To be able to procure and provision 7 different layers, it makes more sense on a marketplace, digital marketplace. And it could be the manufacturer, like an AWS, Microsoft, that runs that. It could be a distributor that runs that. There's 7 different kinds of marketplaces today, but it makes more sense to consume or subscribe to technology in that way. So in a marketplace, for example, if it is a vendor selling direct on a marketplace, 24% of those deals today are partners clicking buy on behalf of the customer. So they're not a reseller because they don't take the money, but they literally have their finger on the trigger, on the mouse, clicking buy on behalf of the customer. What value is that? That's a huge amount of value. And then we know when we sell a subscription that every 30 days, like Netflix only makes money if you keep renewing forever. And so how do you keep doing that? You got to keep, get a habit formed. You got to make it sticky. You got to have somebody out there working on the upsell, the cross-sell, the enrichment of that. You got to have somebody working on the implementations, the integration. There's so much that goes into that, the managed services that goes around that. So in this world, you've got so many different kinds of partners that now it's not just the reseller. I have a Venn diagram over my shoulder of millions of partners with 20 different partner types. And that's where we're going.
Well, and I like your example that you gave about the car dealership. When you think about it, the consumer is a lot more educated. So we have plus we have media, we have social media, we have word of mouth, we have a lot of different information that's available to us to say, I want to buy this specific vehicle. And now it's at the point where some consumers, if they have the choice, will probably say, I don't really need all these other avenues here. I can just go and buy it direct. I don't need this particular model here. So are we starting to see a little shift where the consumers are, since they're a lot more educated and they know what they want, are we starting to see consumers saying their appetite has changed a little bit? Where we spoke about the like the Amazon model. So I see it, I want it, I'll order it, and it'll be here really quick. Are we starting to see any kind of shifts like that?
Well, there is. And, we've always overvalued, again, for 4 decades, we've overvalued the point of sale because everything got paid out at that point. Whatever margin a partner would make on the front end and any of the back end market development funds and new customer bonuses and spiffs and all economics of partnering got paid out at only one point. From a vendor perspective, like when you're selling your widget, you're hoping that the partner did a bunch of co-marketing and co-selling with you to get the customer to buy. You're also hoping that they stick around, even if it's not a subscription, even if it's a product widget, you hope they stick around for the next few years. So when they go to buy that, for me, it was laptops. For them to buy another ThinkPad 3 years later, hopefully that partner stuck around and made the thing work. And hopefully the experience was good enough that they come back to me to buy that widget again and through that partner. So you want the partners, obviously, to be around. But what ended up happening, though, is if a partner did everything, they did the marketing, they did the selling, they did the engineering, they did the customer success, like they literally kept a customer for life on your product, you underpaid them at the point of sale. They took all your SG&A, they took everything away, and you won that deal in your sleep. That's the perfect partner. But what happens, though, in more cases than not, you get the imperfect partner that didn't do anything in the first 28 moments. picked a RFP or was 5 cents cheaper than their competitor and got the invoice at the last second and transmitted the deal for 10, 20, 30% margin, and then walked away and didn't do anything else. So here they sold $1 million of your stuff. They walked away with $300,000 and they did nothing. So you overpaid that partner. So you're underpaying half your partners. You're overpaying the other half. It's not perfect. There's no medium ground. So wouldn't it be great if I could recognize, monitor, measure, and manage partners for the value they provide? Oh, you wrote that ebook. Fantastic. You recorded this podcast. Great. You did that event at the Chamber of Commerce. Fantastic. I recognize those 3 things. The customer bought. I'm attributing that sale to you because I saw the work you did, and I'd like to pay you for that. I saw that they bought through a marketplace, but I didn't attribute that to direct or some marketplace. I attributed that to you because in 1/4 of the cases, you bought on behalf of the customer. Mm-hmm. You did it all for them. The configuration, pricing, quoting, you literally did it all for them as a managed service or whatever. So thank you. That's another point of value. And I know you stuck around because you did the implementation, the integration, the support, the help desk. I know every 30 days you were there as the front line. And it wasn't any confusion for me when they renew every 30 days or when they bought my product every 3 to 5 years, whatever it was. It's no confusion to me why they bought my product forever, because of you. But if I could break it down and pay you for every moment instead of just collecting their money as a point of value, then you'd be richer. And it would encourage you to do more of the work you're doing as a partner. And the good partners would elevate to the top because they'd make the most money. And that's it. That's the economics of partnering changing in this new world.
Got it. So in other words, right now, what we're seeing, and I remember a decade or 2 ago where it was price. People bought and said, I want to get the cheapest price I can buy, and then they'll get it. How quick am I going to get the product? That's what it was based off. Now you're saying that now because we're shifting that model, and my value as to what I brought to the table from the other value added services that I provide for that particular client, I will be rewarded for that in the shift in the new ecosystem is what you're saying there in that particular case.
Yeah. So something interesting happened. Like what you're talking about is value. Another word for that is that total cost of ownership. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a surprise to me selling laptops and desktops and servers. It wasn't a surprise to any one of my competitors or to Microsoft or Intel, anyone in the game. It didn't surprise any of us how bad the customer experience on the back end of that was. Because I got to walk away once I collected my $1,000 or whatever it was per product. But we ended up creating a managed services industry, which is today $387 billion, to help customers deal with the pain and suffering that came after they bought the product. So you can think of a $400 billion market that was to solve for the bigger costs that they were taking. That was a huge benefit to customers. And today we're having companies talk the opposite. They're actually telling customers upfront what the TCO is. So we helped AWS last year, the keynote at reInvent. They got up and said, do you know that it costs $6.40 for every dollar you consume of AWS to get it to work? All the consulting, the design, the architecture, the implementations, the integrations, the security, the compliance, the long-term managed services, all the co-innovation, the 6 other layers that you buy, all that's going to cost you. So if you're looking to buy $100,000 worth of our stuff, I hope you have $500,000 in the bank to get it to work. And so a partner now looks at that and says, there's almost no money in it to resell, an AWS. It might be 3 to 5% margin. You can't pay the mortgage on 3 to 5%. So what you end up doing is going, well, instead of making 3% of the deal, how do I make 300% of the deal? What are all the opportunities of that customer to do all those moments, get recognized for those moments, and get paid appropriately for the value you're providing? And now you're making 300% of the deal in revenue at 75% margin. It's a different equation. The most successful partners today are recognizing the multiplier, not the margin. Because for laptops and for hyperscalers and for everybody else, there's SaaS companies that don't pay any margin. So why would you spend any time at the point of sale anymore when you can look at the points of value?
Wow. Well, that's such an interesting point, the way you bring that up. And I believe I heard you say once that if you think about it in a subscription-based service or a consumption-based model, and I can see the industry changing this way one day in the future, where I only pay for what I watch. Half of the 90% of the things I find on TV or cable or whatever, so cable type company, I only want to pay for what I watch. And I think that's the consumers are actually starting to go that way. And actually, when VARs, MSPs, ISRs, when they actually start providing their services, and I think that's going to be the flavor of what the consumer wants and what that business executive are looking for. Do you think that may be a trend in the future?
Actually, I don't. So
Okay.
all of us as humans are remarkably different. You and I are different in the things we read, the places we go, the people we follow, the way we think about things. Well, I want to consume my transportation from point A to point B. You want to buy your little convertible with a stick shift and be in control yourself. So let's go back to Netflix, because that's the example you used. There's no black and white. There is just absolutely no binary way to look at a customer base. There's a market TAM. For every dollar of streaming, for every dollar that's spent in entertainment as the overall TAM, it's split up multiple ways. And you see Netflix now doing this. There's a layer that wants to pay $15 a month and all consuming. You have literally end to end, and you can consume at will. Even if you watch one movie in the entire month, you're feel good about having access to everything for that $15. There's the next consumer now that they've now announced that wants to consume all of that, and they're okay getting advertised against. For $8 a month. Now I'm saving $7, and I'm okay watching a 30-second commercial here, there, and everywhere like I did normal TV, because it's the lower price that I care about. Then there's the other customer that says, I like that old iTunes model where a song costs $2. And I know today they're trying to charge me some larger amount to get access to every song ever recorded, but I just don't listen to that much music. When I'm in my car, when I'm, in the backyard or whatever, I'm okay, just hit me per song. And if it costs me 5 or 10 cents or whatever per song, at the end of the month, that's going to be much cheaper than an all-you-can-eat. That's a consumption model. So if I split my buyer, whether I'm selling software, whether I'm selling entertainment, whatever it is, if I split it to the nth degree in terms of human psychology, I'm going to have different business models that serve every single one of my buyers in a way that I can make money and I can serve their preference at the same time. So again, you're going to blend subscription models with consumption models and probably have a number of things in the middle. And in the end, you're probably going to have some sort of model that the customer that still wants to buy the license and own it, you're still going to have some sort of outlet for them. And you're going to want to get to your entire market TAM. You don't want to create friction in front of a certain component of humans where they can't buy your product because you're not serving them in the way that they want to purchase or consume or subscribe to.
That makes perfect sense. So when I'm thinking about that in detail, when I think about like the Salesforce, I remember reading where you actually mentioned that you think that Salesforce is going to be $1 trillion company one day. You still believe that Salesforce will be a $1 trillion company in the future? And why do you think that they'll get to that particular level?
Yeah, so I look at and NVIDIA beat them to it last week, but this whole idea about being $1 trillion company, it means you have to get to a gigantic revenue number, at least 100 billion. And Salesforce in their current plans they're at 35 right now, trying to get to 50. So we're still years out from them just on a revenue multiplier being at that 10 trillion. But on YouTube, I kind of went through the 9 steps to becoming $1 trillion company. But it's absorbing their fair share of budgets that already exist. So you can see that they already own the CRM market, but they're a player in the marketing automation department. Like they compete with a HubSpot, Marketo, Eloqua, and they get their fair share over there. They compete to the customer success buyer. They compete with other buyers for their fair share of their purchase budget. They then go and acquire MuleSoft, which gets their chunk of the CIO type of integration buyer. They go and acquire Tableau, which gets them into the operations and finance and business intelligence and data analytics crew. They go and acquire Slack, which gets them into the conversation around collab and communication, a new buyer. So now they're competing with, the Zooms and the WebExes and the Teams of the world. So they're spreading out their acquisition strategy to go get their fair share of enough revenue so they could hit $100 billion in revenue in a certain amount of time frame. And they're trying to get the market to value them at 10x, to say this is all subscription or consumption based. So that's already valued much higher, as managed service providers know, as opposed to selling revenue and widgets. And they're also trying to convince that, like CRM, they're indispensable. You can't run a company without them. And the more they grow and the more buyers, if they do HR buyers, if they get into more finance buyers, and they get their fair share of enough to get to that revenue number, the market should come back and credit them with that bigger number. But that's also direct revenue. They're creating some friction that they grew to that $30 billion number without reselling. But there's 10 to 20% of their customers who do want to buy resell. So they just announced that. They're expanding their TAM. They're expanding their SAM, the service addressable part of that. Mm-hmm. So they're going after that new buyer. That's that Netflix conversation, right? Is we're creating less friction for more buyers. And then, the next problem is that, they're not as geographically dispersed. Like 73% of their income is in the United States. They need Europe and Asia Pacific to become as dazzled about software as a service as we are in North America. So guess what? They need that growth to happen as well. So there's so many things going on at once that they're able to execute. But as a direct company, last thing I'll say about them, as a direct company, they're recruiting 500,000 partners. There's no margin available until now. There's a little bit of opportunities, but right now, the opportunity with Salesforce as a partner is to go earn the $6.19 that gets generated by every dollar of Salesforce consumed or subscribed to. You can go make $6.19 with 200 wrapped around services. That's the economy, what they call the Salesforce economy. And again, when they become a $100 billion company, they're going to be kicking out $600 or $700 billion in services. And that's, not only $1 trillion in, they call themselves today 1.6 trillion in market economy, but I'll say that that's going to be $1 trillion valuation on their stock once they hit those magic numbers.
And when you said that, it makes me think about Microsoft and how large Microsoft is and all the partners that Microsoft they're bringing on too. And I think I heard you mention that with Microsoft, a lot of the people, let's say they're bringing on, let's say 8,000 partners a month. And of those 8,000 partners, I'll give you some round numbers so you can correct me with the numbers. 80% of those people aren't really selling the product for it, but those other people they're the developers, they're the ones that are actually doing the consultative type work. So they're really expanding their business, even though they're not actually bringing in that dollar number there, but they're still making it so that they're expanding their portfolio. Would you say that would be similar to what Microsoft is doing right now? Microsoft is doing it like exponentially and on a different level right now today?
Well, they are. They're bringing on 400 partners a day, which adds up to your 8,000 if you count business days. Mm-hmm. But yeah, their recruitment is off the charts. But I'll say on the flip side, Microsoft has outgrown AWS. They're a much bigger competitor in the cloud. With Azure, they've outgrown them 17 quarters in a row. Their technology product isn't better, most people would say. Their programs, the 4 Ps you learned in college, the place, price, promotion, and all that isn't remarkably better. What Microsoft has is an army of people that surround the customer in those first 28 moments before they make a decision. And Microsoft has a more developed, they've had 40 years to do it, but it's not just the resellers, because that's such a small part of hyperscalers. Because AWS and Google were direct for most of their years up until now. The fact of the matter is Microsoft has more of an enterprise army of partnerships, which is creating faster growth for 17 straight quarters over AWS. And AWS is quickly trying to catch up to this army of partners that could surround the customers in those first 28 moments and guide the customer towards them instead of Microsoft. Almost every consumption subscription business out there, it's an army for talent. a war on talent to get your customers, everybody with budget in your market TAM, surrounded by the 7 people they trust, saying nice things about you all along the way before they make a decision. This is what it is. And if you're selling cars, the same 28 moments. If Motor Trend, that guy on YouTube, if those social channels, if your neighbor and friend, if all 28 of your moments happen to tell you to buy a Mercedes versus a Ford or a Toyota versus a Honda, there's a high likelihood that that's how you're going to land. So that's the army. That's the army you're building. That's the war on those first 28 moments. And the channels and the partnerships you need now in an ecosystem are probably 10 times higher than the army you needed at that point if you're just looking at who's selling the car or who's selling the software.
Okay, and I like how you said that because it brings back to the original, when we started the conversation, we're thinking about distribution. And I remember back in my days with Tech Data, but then it became TD Synnex. And I mean, how many partners have we worked with? I mean, that partner, we did so many different events. We had so many partners out there that were actually touching the customer because they had that customer, that community that they actually had built up around them. So with the shift that's coming up right now, what do you think that's going to actually be 3 to 5 years from now? When you think about that community, what's that going to look like? And how's that power going to, how's that momentum going to still continue like it is today?
Yeah, so if you look at TD Synnex, like they're bigger than Coca-Cola, they're bigger than Nike, they're bigger than McDonald's. I mean, they're one of the biggest corporations on the Fortune 500. It's a big company. It's a big company where my adult children have never heard of it. So one of the things that they're going to have to do in the next 3 to 5 years is come out of hiding. So they're hiding in most cases behind a reseller. And I've just spent the whole initial part of this podcast talking about how resell is a very important, one of 6 elements of importance across partnering. So they have to do 2 things. One is they have to compete in those early 28 moments. There's a ton of value that distribution brings to the table that no one else does, but it's not a white label thing because no one hides in the ecosystem. If a customer's buying 7 layers to solve a problem, one of those layers is moving atoms and bits, to solve the problem, hardware, software, and obviously orchestrating all the services around it. Coming out of hiding and working alongside your customers who are partners and earning that business of the client. If that 8-person MSP is trying to hide, a bunch of, companies behind them, security companies and distribution and stuff, and trying to look much bigger than they are, through those first 28 moments, your customer is going to go to LinkedIn and find out you only have 8 people. They're going to go to the 7 other people than you and look at their resumes. And they don't have the skills and competencies to do what they say they're doing in the proposal. So you have a bunch of white labeled Knox and Socks and distribution behind you. The customer's going to ask the question because they're getting very smart. They're younger, they're smarter, they're more digital. Who runs your SOC? Because I know you don't. Who runs your knock? Who is backing you up on your help desk? Who's backing you up? Tell me what your tech stack is. Who's moving the stuff around? Who's drop shipping to us? I want to know by line item who I'm working with. And by the way, by being transparent, you're actually helping your case. Oh my God, you're working with that $60 billion distributor? Oh, that's fantastic. I know they've got the capabilities of warehousing and 3PL logistics, and I know their configuration and all the ability they have behind you. That's fantastic. I'm so glad you told me because now I feel better about you. That's not hiding. That's coming out of hiding. Number 2 is they have to build a platform for distribution. This is where I'm most nervous about. TD Synnex right now is spending about $1 billion in transformation, but you're not just bringing together the 75,000 VARs that they serve. You're bringing together all of the system integrators, the MSPs. You're bringing together the accountants and the digital agencies, the ISVs. There's 175,000 of them. There's 800,000 emerging tech companies. In that 7-layer, very specific deal, there's millions of permutations. And this is not a human-based problem. It's AI, it's automation, it's building a platform for distribution that can compete on the likes of a marketplace at AWS or Microsoft and others and serve the buyer in the best way possible. Awesome. That's what I'm most nervous about, them coming out of hiding and being able to play that orchestration role for solving customer problems, end customer problems, to the point where we're driving industry and the world forward.
Wow. And I think when you mentioned that, I was thinking about Gen Z, and the way we do business and the way they deal with some of the other generations, how they're going to actually do business in a different manner. And I think that may make a difference in the future too. Do you think that as well? That the different generations are going to make a difference and impact the way the products are sold?
Yeah, well, we're going through the generational change now. I mentioned that the majority buyer across the $5 trillion of the tech industry and telco industry, the majority buyer in 2 years will be a millennial.
Yeah.
And this is creating a lot of the digital marketplace. It's creating a lot of these psychological, behavioral, and journey changes in how things work. And to serve the new millennial buyer, and the Gen Zs are coming behind them, and they're even more digital. Where, your millennials grew up kind of as iPad kids, your Gen Zs are going to, grow up as AR, VR, MR, gaming kids. And they're going to have certain expectations to be delivered, and a platform to deliver at that scale. It is far beyond what the skills that distribution has today, employed in every job. So this is it's an interesting time. Nobody dies in this industry. I only care about who grows the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
This industry is doubling in size this decade. Partners have a wonderful opportunity to be on the front end of that. I mentioned 2/3 of that's going to be services. Distribution has a wonderful opportunity. Of all the hardware and software today that's resold, they grab about a quarter of it.
Mm-hmm.
Massive numbers. There's $1 trillion opportunity to go orchestrate these future outcomes using technology that hasn't even been invented yet. But to be an orchestrator is not going to look the same as what's made them successful for 43 years looking in the rearview mirror.
Okay. One last question for you then is actually regarding, I think about what happened a couple of years ago with the pandemic. In regards to supply chain, do you think that the supply chain, because everything has to be linear now, do you think the supply chain will have a huge effect or impact on the way that everybody else, especially with distribution, goes to market? You think that's going to
it's a huge thing, because I said you got to move atoms and you got to move bits. Mm-hmm. Software doesn't eat the world. And I'll remind you that all the fastest growing emerging tech, I mentioned AR, VR, MR. You could go talk about quantum computing. You could talk about Internet of Things. You could talk about AI or automation, robotics. You can talk about almost anything in the future, 3D printers. Everything in the future is based on a hardware element too. There's a lot of atoms that need to be moved around from different places of the world, and all the 3PL logistics and supply chain and warehousing is a massive opportunity to put together with the bits and the software and the 2/3 of the deal, which is services, and orchestrate that for a delighted end customer is the magic of the future of this industry.
Excellent. So Jay, so with that said, can I have your final thoughts on what you think about especially technology and the way things are shifting so fast right now with all the changes that we see in the marketplace? What would be your final thought that you actually have to a lot of the CEOs and CTOs and CISOs people out there? What would you have to say to them?
Yeah, I would say that the one thing that isn't changing is the importance of partnerships. Actually, all of these business model changes, all of these new buyers getting younger, and all these digital first, and when you get fixated on the point of sale, it would quickly run you to kind of magazine level death of this and death of that, and thinking the world's binary. It's actually much bigger opportunity in partnering going forward. I mentioned 73% of the $5 trillion is partner led and kind of partner first today. When this industry doubles to 10 trillion, I think that 73% number is going to grow. There's going to be more services. There's going to be more value add. And we're going to be able to measure, monitor, and manage those moments better than ever before. And every company, from your bank to your toothbrush manufacturer, is going to have a wonderful partnering strategy on how they're going to go to market, how they choose their routes to market, and how they're going to integrate into your life better. Is all about partnerships.
Awesome. Jay, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy day to have a conversation with me and my audience. And I follow you with your newsletters and the other information that you put out there, especially on LinkedIn. And we just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.